Hello, and thanks for joining us. Today's guest has sold more than 150 million books worldwide. His works have been read in more than 80 countries and translated into more than 30 languages. He's most famous for The Pillars of the Earth and The World Without End, both tomes set in the Middle Ages. His new novel, The Evening and the Morning, is the prequel to Pillars of the Earth. I'm delighted to welcome Ken Follett to the show. Ken, hello.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. Now, where exactly are you at the moment?
I'm in the village of Knebworth, which is about 30 miles north of London. It's a village that's famous because there's a country house here where they used to have tremendous rock festivals in the 70s. The Rolling Stones played here and Pink Floyd, and more recently Oasis. But in fact, when there's not a festival on, it's a quiet little country village. And this is where my country house is.
So what has life been like for you?
Well, my working life is perfectly normal because what I do every day is I sit here and write. And that hasn't changed. But of course, my social life has completely collapsed. And what I really miss is my family. I've got children and grandchildren. I haven't been in the same room with any of my family for 3 months.
Well, the last time when we saw each other was in November. You were on a European charm offensive ahead of Brexit with fellow authors Jojo Moyes, Kate Moss and Lee Child. How the world has changed since then. You came into the studios at France 24. Take a listen.
Well, we all have millions of readers in other European countries who read us in their own languages, in translation. And then suddenly our country started to say, no, we don't like you. We don't want to be in your club. We're all right on our own. And we're embarrassed. And we don't want these people who are so kind as to read our books, we don't want them to think that we're part of that rejection of our European neighbors. And it was that embarrassment that made me think, what can I do about it? Maybe I could get some other writers to come with me and we'll go around Europe and we'll say to our readers, we still love you.
Well, there you talked about being embarrassed about Brexit. What do you make of the government's handling of the health crisis?
These are people who are not very good at weighing up the evidence. And so the Brexit decision was made not on the basis of sensible economics, but on the basis of rather wild emotional reactions. And the government that behaves like that is really not good at handling something that is really very scientific. And so we've ended up with people like Boris Johnson in England and Trump in the States and the Brazilian President Bolsonaro, who react emotionally, and that's completely useless.
Your most ambitious project yet is probably the Century Trilogy, which you completed in 2014, where you tell the entire history of the 20th century. You said you focused on that century because it was the most dramatic century in the history of the human race. How do you think the 21st century is faring now, though?
It's shaping up to be worse, isn't it? Oh dear, oh dear. From the point of view of my country, Britain, it's done something pretty much almost suicidal. That's going to be a disaster. On top of that, we've got COVID-19, which is going to be worse. And the thing about COVID-19 is this is the second SARS virus that has attacked the world. We certainly can't be sure that there won't be a third SARS virus that will come out of somewhere that will mutate. It's possible that these plagues may become a part of our lives, as they were really a part of everyday life from 1348, when the Black Death struck, to 1666, the Great Fire of London. That period of time, a bit more than 300 years, the plague came back to British cities pretty much every few years. God forbid, but it's perfectly possible that viruses like this will become a part of everyday life.
I was looking through your back catalogue of all the books you've written. You have actually written a book about a dangerous virus, Whiteout, in 2004. Are you being inspired at all by what's going on in the world at the moment?
If this hadn't happened, it would have been a really great idea to write a story about a virus that attacks the whole world. Now that it's happened, it's not a novel anymore, is it? I mean, it's real life. So At the moment, I don't think it's such a great idea. No, only because not. I mean, it's tremendously dramatic and thrilling. And of course, in the novel, I'd be able to make sure that it ended happily. And in real life, who the heck knows?
Ken, you're clearly an excellent historian, but history wasn't always your subject. Your breakthrough novel was the immensely popular thriller Eye of the Needle. In 1978, it was your 11th book. It was made into a miniseries with Donald Sutherland. That was followed by other best-selling spy thrillers. But in 1989, with The Pillars of the Earth, you began writing historical fiction. Why did you change direction?
I started my career writing thrillers because I loved thrillers, and I still do love thrillers and read them all the time and enjoy them. I never felt imprisoned by that. And when this idea came to me, I thought, well, this could be big. This could be something that would capture people's imaginations in a way that a short novel rarely does. I didn't know whether I could do it, but I decided I was going to give it a heck of a try.
And The Pillars of the Earth saga became an unprecedented publishing phenomenon. It was on the New York Times bestseller list, something like 18 weeks, I think it was, and number one in many countries for many weeks, even years in some
Years,
countries.
yes. Yeah. On the German bestseller list for 6 years.
It's also a mini-series that was produced by Ridley Scott. How many copies has it sold now?
26 million, last time we counted.
26 million. Well, 30 years later, you've written the prequel, The Evening and the Morning. What can you tell us about it?
I was thinking about the city in which they built the cathedral in the Pillars of the Earth, and I thought it's called Kingsbridge, and I thought, what did it used to be like? How did it get started? Probably it wasn't always a city. Maybe once upon a time there was just a village there, or maybe less, 5 houses. And then how did it grow and change till it became an important place? And at the same time as I was asking myself that question, I was looking into the past and realized that round about the year 1000 was a moment of grand changes in the story of my country and of Western Europe, really. Here we had the Anglo-Saxons, but we also had the Vikings, who were they were like a mafia. And then the Normans, who wanted to conquer England, who were the Normans, who were sort of French, but not really. The three powers formed an interesting triangle, and I could see how there would be conflicts and dramas arising out of that situation. And those two thoughts came together, and I thought, yes, this could be a really good story.
And didn't you feel an immense pressure writing a book that comes before probably your most famous work?
Well, there's always pressure. If I write a page or two that's a bit meh, I look at it and I say, well, it's not bad. And then I remember all those millions of people who really liked my last book. They're really looking forward to the next one. And I think, no, I can't give them something that's meh. And I tear up what I've written and start and write it again. And that, basically that is pressure, but it's quite good pressure.
And one of the themes of the story is the origins of a legal system that doesn't merely serve the ruling chieftains. One of the central themes in your books is groups of people fighting for freedom, fighting for fairness. It's a topic that's very present at the moment in today's world with the protests for Black Lives Matter. I was wondering, what do you make of that, watching it from your house just outside London?
I've lived in London most of my life. We know how Black people are treated in our city, and it's shameful. We've known about it for ages, and I totally get the rage of Black Londoners about this. But I just hope this isn't going to peter out the way previous protests have petered out. It is worth protesting and campaigning and joining a political party and voting in the election. It's worth doing all that because eventually good things happen. You just have to be so patient.
Pillars of the Earth is a novel about building a cathedral in the Middle Ages. You actually wrote a piece of non-fiction about our cathedral here in Paris, Notre Dame, a short history of the meaning of cathedrals in 2019, the proceeds of which are going to the restoration of the cathedral, which was badly damaged by fire. How did it come about?
Like half the world, I watched on TV on the 15th of April last year in the evening those terrible scenes. And 2 days later, I went to Paris to be in a television show about the cathedral. And on the following morning, I had breakfast with my French publisher, and she said, "We'd like you to write a short book about the cathedral, saying why it means so much to so many people, and we will give our profits to the building fund." And I said, "That's a great idea. I'd love to do that, and I'll give my royalties to the building fund." And in fact, I wrote it in 10 days. Normally it takes me 3 years to write a book. It's a very unusual and rather pleasant experience, actually.
And we always end our shows with our guest's cultural pick of the moment. What have you chosen for us?
We watched a show called Normal People, which was tremendously romantic. Daisy Edgar Jones played Marianne, and Paul Mescal played Connell. The story was quite repetitive. Things would go wrong with their relationship, and they would make it up, and they'd have sex, and then they'd quarrel again. The great thing about it, I think, was her face. She's like the Mona Lisa. She's got a face that you can stare at for hours, and it's mesmerizing. It's quite enchanting. That was why millions of people were glued to that show. It was just because you couldn't help adoring this fantastic woman, and you couldn't help wishing things would go better for her.
Ken Follett, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. C'est moi qui vous le remercie.
The Evening and the Morning will be published globally in September. We're going to leave you with your pick of the TV series Normal People. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.
Would you say your feelings are involved?
Obviously.
Who is it obvious to?
Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith.
Reporting from across West Africa.
All the latest in politics, economics and the arts in Africa on France 24. Our journalists are in every region, every country, to report on the emergence of a continent of unparalleled riches. Bringing you Africa's stories on France 24.
Thanks for joining us. Peace again. Take care.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.